Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 27th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
Yeah, we have a full house today with less news than we usually have.
But we have a lot of beefs. We have beefs and scores to settle. So.
Okay, all right. If you have
Don't jinx it on the news front.
If you got a beef,
I got a beef.
Let's hear it.
All right, my beef is with the meta situation we're in with the coverage of Kamala's interview. Will she? Won't she? This back and forth in which the media is completely self-indulgent, completely complicit, and we're not getting to an interview. And she promised us by the end she would schedule it by the end of the month. And this back and forth is, I think, going to be detrimental long term to Kamala's campaign because she does need to sit down and have an interview. The fact that she will, and the fact that the rumors are all that she wants someone like Gayle King or some softball interviewer to interview her is a mistake, especially leading up to a debate where there are a lot of high expectations. So my beef is with both the mainstream media and with Kamala Harris's campaign. Get your acts together, sit down, explain to the American people what you believe.
There's a movie called The Paper. The Paper is about the New York Post, made in 1993 by Ron Howard. And the entire movie builds up to the idea that a reporter has to go and get a quote from someone. We need a quote. They've got to get a quote so that we can complete the story and have the quote. We have somehow transitioned into a time in which the idea that the presidential candidate of the Democratic Party and the sitting vice president of the United States needs to have an interview, one interview. Then it's it. She'll do the interview, and then there will have been the interview. I want to point out Matt Continetti, author of a book about Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin's time in the tank started not because she gave one interview, but because she gave two or three. Right. One to Katie Couric, one to Charlie Gibson. Right. And then I think there was a third. And the whole point about that was, of course, she was going to give 3. She was going to give 10. She was going to give 20. And my guess is, I was thinking this last night, is that the thing that they're scared? I understand they think it's best she doesn't define herself and all of that. But are they having this could be a Sarah Palin thing? And what happened in the Sarah Palin catastrophe week, Matt, that might bear some lessons for the present for Kamala?
Well, in the first interview with Charlie Gibson of ABC, Gibson asked Sarah Palin to define the Bush Doctrine, and Palin gave a very wobbly answer. And Gibson said, that's not the Bush Doctrine, and it became a little kerfuffle because Charles Krauthammer, who had coined the term, the Bush Doctrine, came out and actually sided with Palin, even though he was a critic of Palin's from the get-go. Then a couple weeks later, in the midst of the financial crisis, Sarah Palin had the interview with Katie Couric, who I believe was then with CBS News.
CBS, yeah.
And Katie Couric asked Sarah Palin what she thought of the housing crisis and what the McCain campaign's response would be. And Palin offered up a word salad that pretty much kind of delegitimized her in the eyes of many, many voters. And she slightly recovered when she debated Biden later in the cycle, but it was really the Couric interview that did it. And then that coincided with, of course, the Tina Fey portrayal of Sarah Palin on SNL and the line, I can see Russia from my house, which Palin never said, but that kind of set into concrete the public image of Sarah Palin as kind of a cartoonish figure. Now, there's a big difference, which is that whoever conducts this interview with Sarah Palin, with Kamala Harris, will be on Kamala's side, right? I mean, they're not going to have any tough questions thrown at her, like define the Bush Doctrine or where were you when Biden decided to retreat from Afghanistan. But there's one aspect of this story that I especially thought was entertaining in today's playbook. The Politico Stars write, "What about Tim?" I quote, "One of the issues that Harris World is currently working to address is how to deploy running mate Tim Walz in the media. The danger in sending him out to do big solo interviews is that he might not have a full command of where Harris is on every issue. As someone pointed out to us last night," the Politico writers continue, "Harris talks about the opportunity economy, but if Walz were asked to define it, would he know how? So not only do we not know where Harris stands on anything, neither does a running mate. And the result of this is both of them are off the campaign trail and won't go back on until, I believe, tomorrow afternoon when they're scheduled for their bus trip in Georgia."
That's 5 days. That is 5 days in the course of the world's shortest presidential campaign that Harris has gone to ground and Walz has gone to ground. Again, tactically, structurally, you can see why not? She raised $500 million. She probably doesn't have to raise any more money. Doesn't have to make phone calls. She's got the best press anyone's ever gotten. Why upset the apple cart? And I will give you a reason why. And Abe, maybe you can reflect on this. Yesterday, as Matt noted while we were podcasting, yesterday was the anniversary of the horrors at Abbey Gate, where 13 U.S. servicemen lost their lives in Afghanistan 3 years ago. And what did Trump do? He went to Arlington Cemetery, laid a wreath, stood with families of the fallen. Later in the day, he had an event with Tulsi Gabbard. Now, we may look at Tulsi Gabbard and say Tulsi Gabbard is a lunatic with conspiracy theories and and has terrible ideas. But Tulsi Gabbard was a 15-year veteran. Served in Iraq and Kuwait as a military policeman, rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel. She moved around in National Guard, so I'm not quite sure where. I think maybe California. When she retired as a lieutenant colonel. And I have to say, whatever you may think of her, she gave a hell of a speech at
She's become a
national security event.
She's a very good communicator.
A darling of a certain type of independent, too, which I think helps Trump. Yeah,
right. But even if the point is that Trump had a day in which he talked about national security and a Biden and the greatest Biden failure of his presidency in this regard, and Harris and Walz were silent. And if you're going day by day, Trump won the day, and Trump hasn't won many days in the last 4 weeks. And it's an interesting thing just to note. Now, maybe it's better to be silent about Afghanistan than to somehow try to engage.
She did issue a statement.
Yes.
Her campaign did.
Written statement.
Yes, yes, a written statement.
Yeah, a written statement. But that's not written statement. This again is the joke of the Jonathan Karl encounter with Tom Cotton on Sunday, where Cotton said, well, she supports the elimination of private health insurance. And Jonathan Karl said, but she issued a statement saying that she did. She didn't
really? Even do that on the private health insurance. Yeah. It's just unnamed Harris aides telling the media,
Harris aides,
don't believe, we no longer believe that. And I know you wanted to go to Abe, but there is another point on this question in my morning reading that I thought very amusing. And that's in the other DC bulletin board newsletter, the Axios newsletter. Top item, one big thing, Harris flip-flops on wall. So the Harris campaign has released images of the wall in an ad. Bernie Sanders was asked about that on ABC this week on Sunday. And Harris, of course, in her acceptance speech, said that she will sign into law the bipartisan immigration bill that was negotiated by Oklahoma Senator Lankford and basically collapsed because of Republican opposition. So in that bill, there is wall funding. However, what happened? Well, when the Axios starts asking Democrats about the wall funding in the bill, all the Democrats tell her that don't worry, it's not gonna be a wall. Reality check, I quote Axios. Harris advisors note that the bipartisan border proposal didn't include any new money to continue building the wall. It just extended the timeline to spend funds that had been appropriated during Trump's last year as president, they say, although the legislation has new restrictions to ensure the money is spent on barriers. So don't worry about that wall thing. She's not going to build it. She'll sign that bill into law, but it's not going to have any real effect. Progressives who are worried that she might actually be serious about immigration. It's okay. And just don't quote us so we can't be held accountable.
Okay, so Tulsi Gabbard. Go ahead.
So I think, it's interesting because Matt had brought up yesterday that Trump was winning the day, and you bring it up again, and I think it's true. And I think what he did is smart campaigning and also admirable in itself. I get the sense that the Harris campaign they're not thinking in terms of days. They're not thinking in terms of winning the days or even of rounds. They're thinking we're winning the season. We stay like this. We float above the day-to-day. I said it before, after watching the Democratic convention, her campaign is the closest thing to an AI-generated campaign that's not actually AI-generated. If you put in every prompt that you'd want, you would come up with this dance party, joy, swirling, happy, positive biography, fact-free, policy-free, or low policy, policy light campaign. The danger for them is to go human, and that is what will happen if she gets an actual interview. You take it out of the realm of this AI, and now you're back to the human, and it's mundane and it's ugly.
It is August 27th, as I said at the beginning of this podcast. That means there are 30 days in September, 30 days in October, 31 days in October. So that's 61 days. There are 5 days in November.
Early voting starts soon in places like Pennsylvania.
Okay, fair enough. So she is creating an impression of no impression. So therefore, it's an anti-campaign. And maybe we have moved into the realm of the anti-campaign. We mentioned the Bush doctrine and Palin. George W. Bush. There are different ways to run campaigns. Clinton, because he seemed like an insubstantial candidate in 1992, people sort of don't remember this. He seemed robotic and forced, and he was speaking platitudes. Had to issue this putting people first document to show that he had policy. A lot of policy, so many policies, sort of like a mini version of Project 2025, and he put it out. And that was his campaign, was like little bits of, it's like he was spraying base hits all over the field, or hitting the ball, fungos around. And then there came the George W. Bush campaign, and Bush focused on 4 major issues and talked about almost nothing else, and was unbelievably programmed and disciplined, but talked about them. So Trump is kind of like a combination of the two in this sense, which is that he has things to say on every subject. So in that sense, he's like Clinton. He could talk about any subject, but of course it's all a mess. Like it's, but he's also focused on the large thing. I'm strong. She's weak. She's a communist. I'm not a communist. Whatever. And she's nothing. So maybe, this is the Seinfeld election, and it's a show about nothing, and she's going to win because she's about nothing. Have we fallen this far? I know you run with the candidate you have, and maybe this is the best they have with her, and it's working great so far. But, things change.
But this is why the role of the press in this particular election is so egregious. It's because she does have a record. And the Afghanistan withdrawal example yesterday is a perfect example. She wanted to tout the fact that she was in the room when that decision was made. She is on it. They're a team. Remember, it was the Biden-Harris administration from day one. But now that a lot of their policies and views are unpopular or unsuccessful, she has to distance herself. But instead of doing that in a traditional way, she is relying on the media to do it for her. And they are her completely willing lapdogs in that effort. And people are getting cynical. And this is it's not like 2016 with how Trump's relationship with the media was very combative. But there is something going on among regular people when they see that, because people aren't stupid. This is my constant theme. Maybe we should make it a T-shirt. People listen to what the media is feeding them. They hear nothing from Harris except, these releases from her campaign, and they wonder, is it true? And we are already a pretty highly skeptical people right now. So I think this might backfire long term. But as you say, it depends on, can she run out the clock?
I just want to quote the great late P.J. O'Rourke, who said that half the people are of below average intelligence by definition. So I don't know if I agree with your
that could be the back of the
assessment.
T-shirt.
That would be the back of the T-shirt. Yeah.
Right now,
look, I mean, the truth is that this can end if the other aspect, the other side of the coin that Christine is talking about with the media's responsibility is not just not carrying water for her, but if the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC ran a whole bunch of stories today and tomorrow about how Kamala is running scared and not talking to the press, and is this okay, and is this some sort of crisis of information and whatever, on the third day we would have Kamala Harris's interview. So I'm not saying it's all on them to push her to do that, but they are not bystanders here. We know that if the pressure heats up and she stops getting stories like, how awesome is Kamala's new scarf? And it's just, why won't Kamala talk to us for 2 days? The whole embargo, the whole media boycott ends.
Right. Well,
they could make it stop tomorrow.
That's the drumbeat issue. And this is, I think we've talked about this before, but media create conditions of crisis for politicians through repetition, and through repetition across platforms and across institutions. So if everybody starts saying the same thing at the same time, like, where is she? And we don't know where she stands on anything. It takes 48 hours for that to start penetrating. And then everybody else in the media, Morning Joe and Erin Burnett and whatever, start saying, hey, she really needs to tell us what she thinks about things, and she should come on our show and tell us what she thinks about things, and that kind of thing.
If they don't have the announcement of the interview by Friday, we'll get more of that. Right now, they're in this, lovey-dovey grace period. Of course, they love her. They don't want Trump to win at all costs. There's a faction of the resistance that says it doesn't matter whether she does an interview or not. Anything that advances her against Trump needs to be pursued. But you can detect between the lines, including in some of the newsletters I mentioned earlier in the program, that some people in the press corps are kind of like, this is a little bit weird. You get into the decision tree that she has to go through. And of course, because it's Kamala Harris and it's the Democratic Party in 2024, race and gender need to be taken into account. There's this question, they're wondering, should we go back to Lester Holt because that was the disaster interview that made us go underground for 2 years? Or is that too dangerous? They're clearly workshopping this. We know that about her. There's even a question of who will be the most important advisor. Will it be Maya Harris and Tony West, her family, who have advised her throughout the years, or it will be David Plouffe and Stephanie Cutter, the Obamans, who have come in and taken over the campaign and are trying to recreate the 2008 magic? If all of this indecision continues through the weekend, then I do think you'd get more stories that are like, come on, what's going on, Kamala? I will just say that will be unusual if you have the turn in the coverage, because as I was reading my papers yesterday, I came across this article in the print edition of the New York Times. It was actually published online last week, but it appeared in yesterday's print New York Times. The headline, 23 lesser known facts about Kamala Harris. 1, her name translates to lotus flower in Sanskrit. 3, I'm not going to read them all, don't worry. 3, she's short compared to presidents past. In fact, John, you may not know, she will tie James Madison or be second to him for the shortest U.S. president. Let's see. 9, she spent her high school years in Montreal.
She outweighs Madison. Madison weighed 110 pounds, so she outweighs him.
She's bigger than Madison. That will be the thing. 9, she spent her high school years in Montreal. Something never once mentioned at the Democratic convention. 13, guys, I don't know if you're aware of this. Kamala Harris likes to cook.
Uh-huh.
In fact, she loves food. And it goes
I'd like
on
to hear
on.
more about that.
I thought I literally had to read the article twice before I decided it was not a paid advertisement from the Harris camp. It was hard to tell, because on the previous page was an ad for this big Korean business conference, the Knowledge Conference that's coming up that will feature George W. Bush, Hillary Clinton, Mike Pompeo. I thought, maybe this was another kind of insert. No, it is what passes for political coverage in the era of Kamala Harris.
Well, the next time you hear that, you're going to be sitting Clockwork Orange style with your eyes, kind of kept open.
No, I'm halfway there. Yeah,
I do think though Matt hits on one more important thing, which is that we've talked for a long time about the way the press sees anything that defeats Trump as part of its own personal mandate, right? Like the press has a responsibility to call out Trump and to make sure he loses and all that stuff, and that's conflicting with the press's desire to have people look at them, which they also realize that maybe their responsibility here is to not ask Kamala any questions, because maybe their responsibility here is just to make sure that they save democracy first.
Number 21, her footwear is distinct. New York Times reporting
Footwear
on
is distinct from what?
Well, John, thank you for asking. You need to read this article. Ms. Harris has a large collection of Chuck Taylors.
John Madden did not wear heels.
She has a large collection of Chuck Taylors. The New York Times reports a black pair, a white pair, Chucks with and without laces, Chucks for hot and cold weather, and, quote, the nominee, this is the nominee speaking now, the platform kind for when I'm wearing a pantsuit. Number 21 of facts that you might not know about Kamala Harris. Also 22, and then I'll finish.
Okay.
Because it's just driving me insane. Number 22, quote, her love of dancing has persisted from her childhood to the West Wing. When she was in Montreal, she started a dance group called Midnight Magic. More recently, videos of her dancing in public to Q-Tip at a celebration of the 50th anniversary of hip-hop, down an escalator with the marching band of children, have gone viral on social media.
Okay, so when I was a kid, because I think this really didn't really exist after the 80s as a cultural phenomenon. My sister Ruthie was a great admirer of a magazine called 16. So 16 was for what we would now call tweens, and it was a fanzine about boys, like celebrity boys mostly. So it was Bobby Sherman and Sean Cassidy and David Cassidy and these kind of clean-cut, guys who turned out probably a lot of them weren't so clean-cut when you found out what they were doing behind the scenes. But it would be like 16
Leif Garrett, Scott Baio.
Yeah, exactly. 16
Now I have a Scott Baio reel. Okay, go.
Okay. 16 fun facts about Scott Baio. And it would be like, he wears sneakers without shoelaces.
Scott likes puppies.
Yeah. So
that's where we're at.
It is meet and proper that the most important journalistic institution on the planet Earth has basically devolved into the 1975 September issue of 16 magazine for Kamala Harris.
It was Tiger Beat for the next generation.
Tiger Beat, right.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is not where Abe and I disagree, and will continue to disagree, and he's been right so far, so I'm not going to discount it, is I just don't think this is sustainable. A hot air balloon can float for a long time, but, at some point it's going to run out of the whatever it is that fuels the fire that keeps it afloat. That either needs to be fed, replenished, added to. You have to feed the beast. She's got to do something between now and November. She can't do nothing. The AI prompts are fine until, like the Francis Ford Coppola trailer, it turns out that the AI information that is being reported out is made up or false or bears no relation to what actually is going on. And that's why I say that we have now lowered the bar sufficiently so that it's like if she gives one interview, that's somehow supposed to be sufficient unto the day. Meanwhile, they are trying to Harris people are trying to goad Trump into canceling the debate in September. Now you are here September 10th. Now you are hearing that Trump is the one who is saying I may not debate on September 10th on ABC, which is correct. But the reason he's doing that is that having agreed to this new schedule, the Harris people are now fumfering around with the rules, and they seem to be fumfering around with the rules in order to provoke the reaction from Trump that they are getting, which is to say that remember how the first debate featured this thing where the mics were turned off when the other person was like Trump's mic would be off when Biden was speaking. Biden's mic would be off when Trump was speaking. The Trump people, given the fact that he had a wild success in the first debate, according to his lights, wanted to maintain that rule for this debate. And the Harris people were like, no, the mic should be on. So they're looking to change the rules or the status quo or whatever, I think, in order to create this crisis.
Well, but also after charging Trump with an attempt to change the rules. Remember, the September 10th debate has been on the schedule. It was going to be Biden and Trump's second meeting.
Right.
And we had an earlier kerfuffle over whether the September 10th debate would happen or not. And at that time, it was Harris saying to Trump, oh, no, you agreed to this set of conditions. Yeah. You agreed to this debate. Yeah. How dare you try to get out of it? And eventually, as you might predict, Trump said, okay, fine, I'll do that debate. Now it's flipped. and the Harris people are the ones trying to change the conditions. And the Trump people are like, hold it. We just agreed to do the debate. Yeah. And now you're trying to get us to change because you want to set up a moment. It's so transparent. You want to set up a moment where Trump talks over Harris and Harris gets to do the I am speaking badass line. And
also
that will end the campaign, they believe.
Yeah.
And the kerfuffle buys them more time, buys the Harris campaign more time. John, I just want to make one more point about our disagreement here about when the balloon may or may not come to ground. You've said before that everything that Kamala had said during the campaign, say, every bit of language seems poll tested and tested for public opinion in some sense or another. And I think that's true. Don't you think the campaign has some reason to believe along those same lines that the public doesn't care that much whether or not she sits down for an interview? I don't think I think they'd be right. That's the issue. We want it. The Trump campaign desperately wants it. But I'm not sure Americans care that much at all at this point.
May I speak for John Podhoretz?
Please.
It would be one thing. I will speak for John Podhoretz. It would be one thing if she were up by 5 to 7 points, Abe. You'd be absolutely right. Why do the interview? No one cares. She's not up by 5 to 7 points. She's up by about 2.5 points in the 538 average. She's up by about 1.5 points in the RCP, Real Clear Politics average. The battleground states are neck and neck. A Washington Post analysis released yesterday showed that Trump is still ahead in the Sun Belt states, and she's barely ahead in the Rust Belt states. So this is a toss-up election, and everything counts. If she keeps giving up days to the Trump campaign and allows him to kind of be there and be presidential and be visual and go to the Vietnamese restaurant in the Eden Center here in Northern Virginia and have this kind of amazing reception by Vietnamese Americans living in Virginia, that's an opportunity cost. She is giving up, I think, points to Donald Trump in a very close race.
Also, and this is not to skew the polls because I'm not skewing the polls. Biden was ahead by 10. Hillary was ahead by 8. Trump underpolls. Trump underpolled in 2020. Trump wildly underpolled in 2020. He lost by 3.5, I think. By average, he was down. There were polls that had Biden winning by 17 the weekend before the election was out. There is no reason to believe that Trump remaining an embarrassment and all of that, and people like social desirability bias in certain places may keep people from saying things like, I would not be comfortable if I were with where they are in polling. I mean, I think, again, they could not have had a better month. And therefore, she still faces the structural hurdles that this campaign faces, which is that she is the candidate of the Democratic Party. The right track, wrong track numbers are still around 70%. And they can try to make him the incumbent all they want. He just isn't the incumbent. Now, she may be able to not be the incumbent either somehow, which would be amazing. But nonetheless, you could have this kind of like election between two people who are not either the incumbent. But he's not responsible for the condition of the country having 2/3 of the people say that the country is on the wrong track. And that's what's holding her numbers down. That's why she can't get 10 points up. If you can't get 10 points up with the press that she's gotten over the last month, she's not going to get 10 points up. By the way, even if Trump does a Biden in the first debate and sort of goes totally up and seems like he's senile, then maybe she can open up, a margin that he can't. But absent something like that, and there may be two or three more debates after, 2 more debates after it, theoretically there should be. It's a jump ball with her maybe slightly in the lead and ahead, but
they're happy with that now is the thing. Is that because it's all relative, because at this point they're saying, Joe Biden was going to lose that election and maybe lose it by more than the usual few points.
Well, they had private data. Now, I don't know why the private data is any better than the public data. It's the same phone calls, but they had data which they then wanted to deploy to use him, to use it as a winch to get him, to lead the race, that showed everything going south. And that was the final thing, was this sort of this show and tell they did with Biden to say, you'll stay and you'll be humiliated. Trump will win anyway. Everybody in history will hold you accountable. You've got to retire.
So they're looking at it as though, like, when you have an exchange of, somebody in the NBA hits a 3-pointer, but it gets waved off because of a foul, and then they go in the other direction, and the other team hits a 3-pointer, and they call it a 6-point swing or something like that. Right. They're seeing this in swing terms, that it's, to go from 6 down or whatever they think they might have been looking at to 1 up is a 7-point swing, whatever it is. They see this as a pretty huge swing. And then the other thing is that they don't believe that there's any good they can do with her talking, which is its own sort of red flag. But they genuinely, like, if she's going to start slipping because Trump is gaining, if Trump is controlling the narrative or whatever, they still don't think she can wrench it back in a positive way. They only think that she can wrench it back in a negative way with an interview. They don't believe she can do any better than not talking. And they believe that, and so so far her advisors are not convinced that they're losing points to that.
Let me just ask you a question about this getting off the campaign trail for 5 days, which again is highly unusual. The general thing that happens after a convention, particularly a successful convention, is they hit the ground running. They go on the road. They go on a 10-day trip. The vice president and the president are together. They're, standing on the back of trains with whistle stop rallies. That is what we have come to expect. So this is like the polar opposite of that. This is like, we crescendoed, couldn't have done better, time for a break. Boy, woof, we've had a month, got in. Oh, she's worked so hard. Where?
George Costanza. It's the George Costanza. All right, I'm out. That's good.
Where, by the way, this is the big thing. Like, somebody said to me, she's exhausted. She needed to recharge her batteries. She wanted to see her husband. It's like, what was so exhausting? Explain to me. She was like, she wasn't even doing events during the period after which she became the nominee. Okay, they're having lots of meetings. They're trying to figure out their team. They're having strategy sessions. They have to make decisions. Like, that's not exhausting. I mean, that's like everybody
Maybe
in
she's
America
adopting-
with a job.
She's
Everybody
adopting
in
the
America with a job. Yeah.
She's adopting her boss's work habits, which is not a
Right.
good sign.
According to the New York Times, John,
Yes.
she loves Doritos. So maybe she just had a craving for Doritos all week there in Chicago, very busy, a lot of meetings, a lot of fundraisers. You have to work on the speech. Maybe she just needed a few days to just
visit her Chuck Taylors.
to get her Chuck Taylors on,
Yeah.
open up a bag
Have
of
some
Doritos and
Okay.
just chill out.
But
By the
you
way,
see,
here's
okay,
a line from Politico. By the way, here's
Yeah.
a line from Politico.
Yeah.
Harris campaign staff have been asking reporters who they think she should talk to.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. This is what's important about what you're doing, Matt, which is that you could be ahead of the curve. Right. You are making her, you are structuring the parodic Kamala Harris, which is not even her. It's not even she. It is the press's slavishness toward her that is the subject of your hilarious asides here. And again, it's August 27th. If it's September 27th, even SNL, desperate to make sure that Trump is not reelected, is going to find it very hard not, because they don't have to make fun of her. See, they can make fun of the press, but if the press continues to like be this bizarre, press release factory and Tiger Beat 1716 magazine, there's going to be material there. And that's why the silence is a problem for her, because you need to feed the beast. There are many ways to feed the beast. You can feed them with policy speech. You can feed the beast with personal interviews that, by the way, can be light on policy. She could, in fact, go on The View and The Talk and be interviewed by Gayle and be interviewed by, Oprah, even though Oprah endorsed her, and be interviewed by whoever on earth is the light. She can go on podcasts. She could go on with Charlemagne the God. She could go on with Mark Maron.
If the Kamala campaign is listening, you can go on podcasts. It's an open invitation.
Right. No, exactly. But I'm saying it's not like they can't supply.
But the Seth is right.
Yeah.
The fundamental worry is the candidate. Mm-hmm. There's a lack of confidence in the candidate's ability to string 3 sentences together unscripted. Right. And you mentioned Charlemagne the God. Remember when she went on in 2019? It was a disaster.
Right.
And, all The View, who knows? The View would be very happy, receptive. You'd have a lot of joy. But the second she gets a question that she's not sure about, we know this. She's been around. That's my biggest frustration.
Yeah. Right.
It's this idea in the press and the Democrats are propagating that somehow she emerged ex nihilo from Joe Biden's head. And now she is going to be Kamala to the world. And we're all going to be so happy.
It's rib cage. God took a rib from Joe Biden.
But she's been around. We know who she is. We don't have to think. We don't have to think hard about this. But before we go, I do want to talk about the incumbent president, because I think. Yeah, exactly.
Who's that?
I think you make a good point by wondering, well, this is kind of an open race in a way. And the Harris campaign did a very good job in the past month in portraying it as an open race. And she's a fresh face and she's going to give us the new way forward and everything. But Biden is still the president. He spent last week out to pasture in the ranch in California. He made a big trip this week. He flew from his vacation home in California to his home in Rehoboth, Delaware, where he's going to spend the following week. But don't you say that Biden isn't active, because, John, I will have you know.
He likes Doritos?
Because he likes ice cream.
He does wear weird sneakers now.
Look, this is the statement from the White House. White House spokesperson Saloni Sharma, quote, President Biden is on the job wherever he goes. Anyone claiming anything otherwise is either misinformed or engaged in misinformation. If you think that he is not told. So compared to the absurd propaganda that we have lived under from the Biden White House for 3.5 years, Harris is kind of a breath of fresh air, because it's like, how much gaslighting can you take? Now, I know the Democratic convention, that was 4 days of kind of gaslighting and we're not really in charge and everything. But the absurdity of comments like this from the White House spokesperson, he's on the job wherever he goes. You're engaged in misinformation if you wonder why he's on vacation for 2 weeks in the midst of world crisis and the economy, and to bolster their case that actually he's on the job. You know what he's up to? I mean, he had a call with Narendra Modi. He called Prime Minister Modi of India and congratulated him on his trip to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Can you work as hard as that? I don't think so.
I have a piece up on the website put up yesterday called "Biden Lied, Biden's Career Died," and I ordinarily don't pump my own stuff here, but I think people should go and take a look at it, because something occurred to me. I actually called Matt from the car to work this thought out yesterday as I was driving back from dropping my kid off at boarding school, which is that there seems to be a shocking lack of gratitude, emotion, feeling about Joe Biden upon his slow departure from the world scene. And that it seemed in the hours after he announced that he was not running again, that we were getting he is the greatest figure. So he is so voluntarily surrendering power. What a gesture. What a incredibly self-sacrificing. George Washington returns to us to say, I will not be serving more because the country needs something else, and all of that. And by the time the convention rolled around, that was all gone. And nobody, almost, if you think about it, there could have been tributes to Biden every single day at the convention. One thing on him as a, like heartfelt hugging people who lost their loved ones, and one about what he did compassionately on this and the Green New Deal and the this and that and the other thing. And there was nothing. She said a paragraph, and Barack Obama, having basically stabbed him in the back 15 times, said, he's my friend. I love him so much. And what a great guy. And that was it. The Democratic Party is done with Joe Biden. It is as though he died 10 years ago. As I say in my piece, this was like he was to that convention as though Michael Dukakis had been this was 2024 and they were talking about Michael Dukakis, which is to say nothing. And why is this the case? I think it's the case because Biden broke a promise he made to the American people and to the Democratic Party, and that the promise in 2020 was he was going to serve one term. And when he decided that he was not going to serve one term, that he was going to try to serve 2 terms, something happened in the body politic it didn't even know was happening. First of all, 2/3 of the Democratic Party and the Americans said, 80% of the American people and 2/3 of Democrats said he's too old to run again. And they told him that in June of 2023, and he didn't listen. And it took him face planting at this debate for it to become clear that that thing that everybody knew a year earlier, except the same slavish, embarrassing, hypocritical, and fourth-rate press that governs the United States conversation, were covering for him. And I think they don't like him anymore. And I think it's really bad for presidents and leaders to lie to the American people and to their voters, and to give them an impression of something and then go back on it. And people do, in fact, hold them accountable when they do that. And that this may be one of the reasons that I think one of the reasons that Trump lost in 2020 was that he spent his entire presidency telling fibs. Lies, little lies, big lies, crowd size lies, whatever. He's building a wall that he's not building. Mexico's going to pay for it, which it isn't. All of that. People don't like being lied The public does not like being lied to by their leaders. And no matter what the press does, and no matter how the press covers, she is going to face a moment at which she is going to either have to tell the truth or lie about the Biden record and all of that and where she stood on it. And they may not like it. And they don't really, I mean, her positives are now way up, right? Which means they're at 47% and they were at 34%. That's a huge gain, right? It's like 50% gain. But she's not at 60%. And, you know, leaders used to routinely get 55, 60%, at least personal favorability ratings. She's not there. It's a jump ball race. Yeah, and they can keep her silent because they're worried that she'll lie. But the Biden example is, don't do this anymore if you're a politician. Like, try not to lie. People used to tie themselves into knots not to lie. That's why spin was invented, was to be able to tell the truth, or like to lie while telling the truth. That's what spin is. You acknowledge that you're doing something that people don't like, but you come up with some BS reason why you're doing it, or you reframe the conversation. And this is a big moment, because the question, who seems like the bigger liar, is going to play a role in 2024. It's hard to imagine people thinking that Harris is a bigger liar than Trump, but she's not saying anything, and she's got a whole 2.5 months to lie.
Well, I have a prediction, which is that when they go back on the trail, I believe tomorrow, Wednesday, August 28th, Governor Walz is going to be very excited to be there. And when he enters the arena or leaves the bus, his hands are going to be up in the air. And he's
jazz hands, yes.
He's got to have his jazz hands, and he's going to cross his heart. You know, if you notice that move he does, where he takes his two hands and he puts them over his heart, and then he points to, you know, a random trash can in the back of the hall, or kind of the catwalk up in the sky. And he'll also do his double lip curl. It's one thing, many politicians, Bill Clinton, of course, famously did the one lip curl, but Tim Walz does Bill Clinton better.
So he's the Simone Biles. He's the Simone Biles of the lip curl.
He is the champion of the lip curl.
Clinton was the Nadia Comaneci of the lip curl.
And another question.
Yeah. So I just know that. I don't know what's going to happen in this race, but I know that Tim Walz is going to be very excited and very happy and very grateful to all the little people that he'll point to and then cross his hands over his heart in acknowledgement tomorrow and every day, perhaps for the next 8 years of our lives.
All right, but so here's to John's question, though. Is it going to matter that Tim Walz tends to lie? Because he's been caught in several pretty serious, right? I mean, pretty substantial. I don't know, serious. Say substantialized. Does it matter that he's the only one speaking for the campaign right now, or does it not affect the vice president? Because is it coming from the campaign, or is it just about the top of the ticket?
I want to make a case that it matters, and it matters in relation to what happened yesterday with the Abbey Gate commemorations and Trump and Gabbard and the talk about the military in Afghanistan. It matters because this is going to be a very close run election, and closely won. And it matters in states, several of them, that actually have large veteran populations. And in theory, Walz as a veteran should be a positive. The stolen valor stuff, again, undercurrent, could have an effect of tarnishing the idea of this ticket with people who are not necessarily going to stand up and say, I don't like him and they're liberals and all that. But it's like, I don't like where this is going. I don't like him. There's something about he's like telling fibs about his military service, and that together with Harris's complete lack of any experience, connection to, or anything with the U.S. military. That's not a large number of people in the country, right? I mean, very few people serve now, but they have family members and all that. But does it matter in Arizona, which is a place where a lot of military people go to retire? North Carolina is a military state. I mean, it's not dominated by the military, but the veterans vote is important in North Carolina, and I do think that this has a little bite if it is combined with 3 or 4 other things that make you uneasy about the ticket. It won't be determinative, but if she runs away from foreign policy issues, doesn't say anything substantive about the sacrifices of the military, except I'm going to help, I'm going to give you money, which is sort of the way Democrats default to everything. It's like, don't worry. Yeah.
I think his lies would matter if they were really truly adjudicated in the press, and they're not. It's all sort of hanging out there as a possible kind of stretch, kind of misspoke, kind of this, kind of that. If it became an actual slam dunk story, which it could be, I mean, you know, there could be enough there, then it would matter.
Look,
as it stands, there's enough ambiguity around it because of the press to say, "Oh, this is a Republican concoction. This is Republicans pouncing."
Well, and they haven't all been brought into a story where they're all laid out in one place as a narrative. As a good reported out story of all of the dissembling and the lies would be useful.
He does seem to be a little more than commonly prevaricated, like he does. I will say, like, which I'm surprised by. Like, there's no, ordinarily that's again a vetting process would say, I don't know, we're looking at this and we've seen 20 years of the press clips and stuff, and there's stuff there. We're giving the other side some ammunition if we bring them on, right? The idea with Josh Shapiro was we're giving our own side ammunition against us if we have Josh Shapiro because 12 Arabs in Dearborn, Michigan hate him because he's a Jew. But there was no question that, the ammunition was only internal. But I don't know. Yeah.
If this were J.D. Vance, there would be a New York Times homepage, high-tech graphic piece show, the six big lies of J.D. Vance, how he told them and how reporters tracked them down. And they'd have the original documents and they'd have video clips and and it would be a slam dunk case.
Well, it's funny because he's not just lying about his career and his record. Wall's personal embellishment seems to be a through line. And Eliana Johnson of the Free Beacon had an incredible story over the weekend where she found something from his earliest congressional race back in 2006, where he was inflating some community award he received. They're also lying about Vance. And to hear the convention speakers talk about Vance, you would think that he grew up in Middletown, Ohio, and went directly to Yale. the Ohio State, the service in the military, they're completely airbrushed that out of Vance's biography and are creating this kind of image of Vance as this silver spoon guy, and it's complete fabrication. I will say the Walz-Vance debate is going to be very interesting because J.D. Vance is quick on his feet. I said this yesterday, watching him being interviewed by Kristen Welker of NBC News, and Walz is he's a pro, as I've said before on the podcast. So that debate, unusual for vice presidential debates, I think will actually be pretty interesting to watch. And I don't think there's a clear favorite either.
Right. I mean, vice presidential debates are often better than presidential debates. I mean, if you think about it, Cheney-Lieberman, easily the best debate of our lifetime as a debate. Ryan versus Biden was fascinating. I mean, it was a very interesting because it was sort of like the wonk versus the anti-wonk.
Right.
Ryan trying to cite facts and Biden laughing in his face. It was interesting. Good television. So I do think
and then with Harris and Pence, we had the fly.
The fly, yes, the fly, and the I'm speaking.
Yeah. And
don't forget, that's
what if the fly returns at the September 10th debate Wouldn't that be interesting? The Fly comes back.
Vance won't have hairspray, so I
No,
guess
I'm
it
saying
won't
for
have
the
anything to stick
Harris-Trump
to.
debate.
No, the Harris-Trump debate.
Yeah.
Well, Trump certainly has hairspray. So yeah, it could. What if they release flies? What if the Harris team releases?
Well, that's what the Palestinian
flies?
activists, the Hamas activists, said. So they go into these hotels and they
Yeah.
release insects.
Yeah.
One of Obama got bumped up 5 points in the polls when he killed a fly during an interview. Remember that?
that's right.
He was
That's right.
like
Bear
a
interview,
like a
yeah.
ninja.
Yeah. Listen,
It was like
by
watching
the way,
Karate Kid with the chopsticks.
one thing to watch for in terms of the question of what Harris is going to have to address is college is back in session or is coming back in session. And we had the first scene yesterday at Columbia, which was a disruption of a sort of a pre-convocation meeting on campus where 50 members of some group that calls itself the Student Intifada started ranting and screaming and raging and trying to disrupt things. And at Cornell, the main administration building was defaced with graffiti saying Free Palestine and stuff like that. Next week is really when things start. This is going to be an interesting question, what role these radicals want to play. I wonder whether the fizzle of the demonstration in Chicago suggests that they really don't want to be held liable or responsible for putting Harris in the barrel. That is not what's of interest to them or to their paymasters. And who are their the Tides Foundation, other people, including maybe foreign actors, may not want that to be the case. And so the Coleman tent buyers may be withholding some of their support. I don't know, but that's a real X factor thing that, again, when the debate rolls around, assuming Trump doesn't go completely psychopathic and, decide to cancel the debate that he needs, that will come up. And if it doesn't come up, Trump will bring it up, and she will have to address it. And it's hard for her. Of course, we would look around and say, Sister Soldier moment, fantastic. Just say, you can't do this to Jewish kids walking on campus. How dare you? And, kids need to learn. Our future depends on education. I mean, it's slam dunk, easy Sister Soldier if you're going to do a Sister Soldier, which she clearly doesn't want to do.
Which she did, the day that she skipped Bibi Netanyahu's joint address to a joint session of Congress, she countered that negative perception in the press, I guess, with a pretty strong statement the next day on those protests outside, calling them essentially un-American.
So, okay, here we are. So we'll see what happens. I do have a recommendation to share with everybody, and we basically suspended the commentary for a couple of days. And I want to preface this by saying it's a movie that I want to recommend that is violent and a little exploitative. So if you don't like violence, you can't take it. This is not a movie for you. But it's called Strange Darling. It is a small thriller, basically a two-hander, two actors you've never heard of, Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Getner, and it's about a serial killer in Oregon, and it's sensationally good. And I will literally say nothing more about it, except to say that it's sensationally good in all kinds of unexpected ways. And if you don't mind a violent serial killer movie, it's one of the best movies I've seen this year. Not that I've seen all that many movies or that there have been many movies to see, but
in the theaters or streaming?
It is in the theaters. It's in 1,000 theaters, open this weekend. So if you're in a metropolitan area, it's probably around somewhere where you can see it. And so that's Strange Darling. Give it a shot, and give us a shot tomorrow when we'll be back. So for Seth, Matt, Christine, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.